Muscle ups. If you don't have them, you definitely want them. John and I cover how to progress each of the individual strength and mobility components of the movement from beginner all the way to advanced. We rattle off some different programming examples along with the why behind it. We talk prerequisites for the movement, and I'm sure a lot more awesome and useful training info. Episode 9.
Actually, we'll be interviewing as a team.
You are the best movers on the planet. So, bro, what kind of muscles you have? No. Bro, what kind of patterns you have?
We're here to fuck shit up.
Yeah, it's 9.
All right. Episode 9, Movement Athlete Podcast. I'm Dr. Wes Hendricks.
I'm John Lindsey.
So me and John Lindsey, we're going to talk about muscle up development today. I don't know why we decided we're going to talk about muscle up development, but it just seems like we should talk about muscle up development.
Well, I think you said it before we started recording. There's definitely a mobility aspect to it. It's a technical strength skill. It's something, if someone doesn't have one, they probably might not know the steps to get it. So, and I think once you realize those steps and how to implement the proper programming, it's pretty easy and straightforward to get. So,
yeah,
useful information for anybody trying to get into this type of training.
And let's be honest, it looks pretty cool. You want to show your friends that you can do a muscle.
Oh, totally.
It's more of a, honestly, I tell people this all the time. It's more of a, I don't want to say a party trick, but it's one of those things that once you train all those individual components, you're just going to all of a sudden have without having to like specifically hammer away at muscle ups, like, you know, as opposed to something like, you know, press to handstand. You know, we need to drill that specific motor pattern or that skill. Same with the handstand push up. You know, you're not going to get a middle split without hanging out in that middle split position. But the muscle up for most people, you know, you can get it by working these individual components. So that's what kind of makes it cool too, you know, or not as elusive. Is elusive the word I'm thinking of?
I think so, yeah.
Okay,
it works
yeah.
there.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that confirmation there. It's not as elusive as one would think. It's much more attainable. So let's talk about that. So from just a raw strength standpoint to start out, and you may disagree with me, so I'm cool with that if you have other thoughts on this. Generally, I want someone to be able to have 3 to 5 strict ring chin-ups, and I'll talk about why I chose ring chin-ups in a moment, and 3 to 5 ring dips as well. And those aren't hard numbers. I've had remote clients that have gotten strict muscle-ups, and they only have 1 to 2 strict ring chin-ups and strict ring dips. But for just kind of not knowing the specific individual in front of me, as a generalization, I'm comfortable saying that 3 to 5, you're going to have the raw strength to do it. You already are strong enough to complete the movement.
So what are you, can you define strict for both of those?
Yeah. So first of all, no kipping. The term I like to tell my clients a lot, don't move like an asshole. You want to be controlled throughout the entire range of motion. So for the strict ring chin up, we're starting elbows locked out, shoulders elevated into the ears. And when we initiate the movement from the shoulder blades, from the arms. The hips, for the most part, are staying stationary. So what I mean by that is we're not swinging the feet out in front of us to generate momentum to assist us on the way up, kind of like a kip. Or if you were to visualize this, guys, if I was doing a ring chin up and John was 3 to 8 inches in front of me, I would not kick my co-host here. I would just pull myself up smoothly to the top of the rings, and John would be unharmed. And ideally, I want to be pulling, especially for the muscle up, I want to be pulling the rings to my chest there. For the ring dip, it's going to be starting in the top of a ring dip or a ring dip support position. I'm going to lower myself down until my biceps touch the top of the rings. I'm going to press back up. Once again, the hips are staying more or less underneath me. I'm not kicking them out in front of me, or I'm donkey kicking to assist on raising back up in the ring dip. The top of the ring dip, I want to be able to have completely locked out elbows in that pretty ring dip support position. I know you've been posting about those a lot in your stories lately. So a solid ring dip support position. The reason why I say ring chin-ups is because with the ring chin-ups, we're starting pronated and we're turning to a supinated position at the top because that's just the natural path of the rings. And that's going to more similarly mimic what one's going to do in a false grip. You're going to start in this kind of semi-pronated, supinated position in your false grip. And then as you pull up, it's going to rotate into more of a supinated position at the top before you make that transition. And then the ring dip is just really to show that once you make that transition, you can press up into a ring dip. And then it also gives us a base level of shoulder extension strength for the mobility component to be able to start working maybe some more advanced shoulder extension stuff. So raw strength, that's what I'm looking for. And if you have that, you're at least 50% of the way there, I'd say.
Cool. So what do you, let's say somebody doesn't have those things and you're trying to, maybe they have a sloppy pull up, a sloppy dip, like that's max ever. They can maybe get one or two in a session. What are you programming to get them to that first then? Because I think a lot of people might have the way you defined it, define those two, the strict way of doing them, that might be tough for some people. So how do you acquire those first?
I like this. You've made it all inclusive. We're including all of the listeners here. You're much more kind and considerate than me.
I agree.
I think both of our significant others would say the same thing, so it's fine.
Probably.
So yeah, if you have 1 to 2, that's a great question, because if that's your max, you really can't, just go into a training session and start repping them out to accumulate volume. You just don't have enough capacity yet to accumulate enough reps in a session to cause a training effect or cause some sort of adaptation to happen. So the way I would do that probably is I would work the negative portion of the movement, because you're going to be like probably close to 1.5 times stronger in the negative portion of a movement. So just a super simple superset here would be, you could do ring chin up negatives. You could do 10-second eccentrics by 5 sets and pair that with 10-second eccentric ring dips. Same thing, slow and controlled through the entire movement. You really don't want any, what would the word be? Would it be undulations? So I'll try to describe the word I'm trying to find here. Where you kind of speed up and slow down. You know what I mean? Have you seen somebody do an eccentric?
Oh yeah, it's just one smooth tempo throughout. Yeah.
Well put. That was very poetic. Beautiful. I want slow and controlled through the entire movement. What inevitably you find is some people are going to be weaker in the start of the movement. Some people are going to be weaker at the end of the movement. So those weaknesses come out in the eccentric where they kind of speed up or slow down. So I kind of want a steady 10 seconds throughout the entire range of motion. You could do that for 1 to 2 eccentric reps per sets even. So you're accumulating a lot of eccentric time under tension, which is how you're going to build strength in the movement to begin with. And then over time, what you'll find is that your concentric reps are going to start to go up. And then once you can start training, 5 singles in a session of ring chin-ups, so 1 by 5, same thing with ring dips, 1 by 5. That's a nice place to start where we can slowly over time follow what one could call like just a basic linear periodization, 1 by 5, 2 by 3, 2 by 4, until eventually you're at that 3 to 5 rep range.
So if you've got someone who's just maybe getting into that 3 to 5 rep range and their ultimate goal is to be doing muscle ups, are you at, I know you're going to be doing this, so just where within the session would you program in any sort of false grip work, like just false grip hanging, false grip rows, anything like that? Would that be before the pulling, pushing stuff, or would that be at the end?
So I'd probably make it as like my B series or the secondary exercises. So I would start off a session with kind of like what I already talked about. If we're going to do the letter nomenclature, if we're going to do the letter whatever, my A1 would be some sort of pulling, ring chin-ups. My B would be some kind of pushing, or my A2 would be some kind of pushing, ring dips. And then my B1 would be some sort of false grip. We could do a false grip hang in the bottom of the movement, or we could do a false grip rings to chest hold at the top of the movement. And I would actually superset that or pair that with, and this is where we get to start to pick your brain here, with some sort of shoulder extension mobility movement, because the transition from the top of the false grip pull up to the ring dip is shoulder extension, because we're bringing that shoulder behind us. And when people lack that range of motion, that's when you see that super sketchy chicken wing thing, because they just can't control the transition. So I would superset with that with some sort of shoulder extension. And now I'd want to know from your point of view, what do you like to just start off with? Because I know you work with a wide range of, clients online to, an older population in person. So, you're definitely getting a lot of tight individuals. What have you found? And shoulder extension is also, it's a super painful range to start working on if you don't have it, in the chest, anterior delts, those biceps. Where do you like to start on that?
The two moves I like that I think are both pretty good for anyone who's just getting into the mobility space or would be ideal for the client we're kind of describing right now. What I would call a shoulder extension lift, where you're just sitting on your butt, feet are planted, hands are basically right in line with your shoulders, fingertips pointed out to the side, and you're keeping a locked elbow and you're lifting your butt up. And by doing that, you're taking your shoulder into extension, pausing briefly at the top, coming back down. That's pretty scalable for most people, even if you aren't getting your torso as high as you possibly could, you're still working through shoulder extension. So that's an awesome one, very easy to execute, no equipment whatsoever. I also like shoulder extension passive range holds, where you're gripping could have weight on it, but you would start with no weight, just a weightless wooden dowel, and you're holding it behind your back, thumbs pointed out, and you're piking forward, so letting your upper body just fall forward. And when you do that, the shoulders will come overhead and the bar will drop essentially kind of like towards where your head is in the pike. You'll slowly stand back up and you'll try to maintain the shoulder position. So you've allowed gravity to drop your shoulders into as much passive range of shoulder extension you have. And then when you stand back up, you're just trying to fight gravity and hold that position. You'll probably drop a centimeter or so, but try to really maintain that position as best you can for about 5 seconds. Do that for five reps in a set, and that's a really good stimulus.
So with that, so you said thumbs out. So your hands are essentially, if I'm imagining this, are they pronated, supinated in that position? Because it's backwards. So now I'm confusing myself.
Well, when you're just standing up straight and the bars behind your back, they'd be supinated. They'd be supinated, yeah. Okay, so they're facing towards the floor of the palms. Okay, so that's super crucial, at least for my perspective here, and we're going to work towards it here. But the goal is I want people being able to do skin the cats or German hangs. And when I have them do it with a supinated hand position to stress the biceps. The pronated hand position isn't wrong, but I just find it stresses the elbow joint more. So I'm glad that you're starting off with even the most basic variation of supinated. My next question has no what's the word I'm looking for? No significance towards the muscle up whatsoever. I'm just watching you in the video. How close is your face to your microphone? Because I feel like I always sound so far away and you sound so good. And we have the same microphone. Maybe 4 inches.
4 inches, okay.
Well, I'm also like moving back and forth. So it probably goes from about a foot away to anywhere from 3 to 4 inches away. Okay.
I feel like I'm like not 4 inches. I'm probably like 12 inches here. So maybe I need to talk in. You gotta
get the ceiling mount so you can just bring it down.
I'll set the ceiling mount into my apartment here. I'll definitely lose my security deposit. All right. So back to the shoulder extension lift. So that's where you like to start people off. Where do you like to go from there? Because that's can you take that one pretty far?
So with the first one I named, just lifting the hips up, that one you're probably going to max out on at some points. But the passive range hold, what you can do is you can add weight to that. You can throw a 2.5 or 5 pound plates on the bar, perform the same thing, and then you're just building more strength in that shoulder extension range. You could also do from that same position just shoulder extension lifts. So holding a bar behind your back and that has weight on it, and you're just lifting your arms up into shoulder extension as high as you can, trying to stay as upright as possible, holding for a few seconds at the top. That's another way to progress it.
So I'm trying to move my face closer to the mic.
Oh, that does sound better.
I'm watching my own self in the video now on your end.
Stack that on some books for next time.
How far apart are your hands on this?
That's a great question. So any sort of beginner whose shoulder extension sucks, they're probably going to be pretty wide. But ideally, you want to get them as close to shoulder width as you can. Probably not going to happen right away, but just over time, as you feel like you're less challenged by your hand super wide, take them in an inch, 2 inches on each time, try and tighter.
Okay. So we start loading up that movement for either variety's sake, just because maybe the client or the individual is getting bored, or we're looking for another exercise. Where would you like to go from here?
I would go to a skin the cat or a German hang.
Okay.
At that point, if you've done some sort of weighted progression of the shoulder extension passive range hold or the shoulder extension lift with the bar, like you're probably ready to dabble with probably the skin the cat first, just performing the skin the cat, getting to your dead hang position just briefly for a second and then flipping right out of it. You're probably ready to do a few reps of that.
All right, I'm glad you said that, because I was, as we were talking, I was thinking, I wonder which one John prefers to do first. If he likes to start people off with skin the cat versus German hang, one versus the other. And I'm glad you said that, because we're on the same page, so we agree with this too. I think you should have pretty good control of the skin the cat before you start hanging out in the German hang, because if you can't control yourself to get in and out of the movement, there's no point in doing it. Because sometimes I'll program German hangs for remote clients, just making the assumption, and this is my fault, making the assumption they can get into the German hang and they can't get into the German hang, or they can get into the German hang, but then they don't have the control to get out of it. So they ask me if it's okay if I just kind of jump out of it, or if I can't get into it, can I just set the rings up in a way to get into the German hang? Or I see people do this online a lot. I think the skin the cat's a better way, so you can learn how to control yourself in and out in the movement comfortably before you start hanging out in the movement. Because kind of like we talked about this with the chest to wall handstands, people get really sketched out in that position as they fatigue. So I've already started programming for some of my clients chest or wall walks after you talked about it, as kind of an intermediary step for the chest to wall handstands, just to reduce any sort of chance of fatalities in the chest to wall handstand position. So it's same thing with the German hang. I think the skin the cat's the good place to start.
Yeah, and if you've got a solid skin the cat, you could program, all right, 5 reps on the 5th one, hold for 5 to 15 seconds in the German hang, just kind of start to test what your strength tolerance is on that, and just do it on the last rep.
And when you're doing German hangs, do you like to drive your hands actively into the rings to kind of get that good active shoulder extension position?
What do I think about?
Oh, what do you think about?
I like gripping the ring hard. I like thinking about actively retracting the scapula, actively elevating them as well. Any sort of activation you can think of like that is just going to get you more extension, but it's also going to really engage not just the musculature, but all the connective tissue that's involved in the movement. And the adaptation you're going to get out of that is just going to be greater if you're stimulating more stuff. So even if you're just pausing for a second with the skin the cat every rep, or if you're holding for an extended period of time in the German hang, making sure you activate that stuff on the back side of the upper back is huge for your body just retaining that position and understanding how to be strong in that position.
I like that, stimulating stuff. John wants me to stimulate my stuff. So there's definitely also levels to the German hang or the skin the cat when you're opening up and coming out of that position. Because if you watch somebody that first starts off doing a German hang, as they're in that kind of the bottom position of the German hang, you'll see what people will do a lot of the times is they'll pike their hips, and they'll pike their hips to take pressure off of the shoulders. So that what I'm talking about for a piked hip position is going to be the chest facing more or less the floor, whereas you want to have your upper body in line with your hips to really kind of demonstrate that open shoulder position. Would you say that that's about accurate? Because you've definitely, I'd say, more or less mastered the German hang with being able to do dislocates.
No, that's perfectly put. And if your goal is just to your goal is I'm using this drill as a way to get the muscle up, you don't need to take the German hang or the skin the cat that far.
Yeah.
And how would you define? Is there anything you'd look for in a client where you'd say, okay, we've been working German hang / skin the cat. This person's shoulder extension looks good enough. When
they can come in and out of 3 to 5 reps very comfortably, not bending the elbows, not doing some sort of weird kip or momentum thing to get in and out. Whether they have a completely vertical torso or if maybe there's like a small hip pike, that's fine. I'm not looking for like perfect shoulder extension at this point in time, but I want a relatively vertical torso. I want the hands supinated in this position. So it gets kind of confusing when we talk pronated, supinated, but then the hands are behind us and above our head. So supinated in that position. So I'm like demonstrating this in my apartment right now. So it's going to be palms behind you. And all that's going to do, it's going to put more stress on the bicep itself, as opposed to if the hands are pronated, it's going to overstress the elbow joint. And we want to stretch the bicep anyway and have better control and shoulder extension with a supinated position, because it's going to be better for mobility too, in my opinion. John could disagree with me. I don't know.
No, I like that. That's all spot on.
So 3 to 5 reps or being able to hold German hang for about 20 to 30 seconds where you're comfortable in that position. And then after that duration of a hold, you can actually come out of it too. Because a lot of times when we do longer duration holds, like the thing I'm thinking of right now is like the middle splits or a long horse stance. When we first start doing them, like you go to come out of it, like you can't come out of it on your own. You need to use your hands. You're almost stuck in that position for a moment. So you have enough ownership to comfortably come out of the German hang. So I'd be back to the original question. I'd be supersetting some sort of false grip hold with those, German hang, skin the cats, or one of the regressions John and I talked about previously.
So what do you, okay, so now we've got a person who's got the prerequisite chin-ups, the prerequisite dips. They've got the prerequisite shoulder extension mobility, and they're working towards better false grip strength. What are we doing? Where are we taking this program now? Are they starting to work the muscle up movement somehow, assisted or something, or what's
sometimes
what's
honestly,
the next step?
Sometimes people at this point in time, once they get comfortable holding that false grip position, specifically at that top. So I was talking about a false grip isometric hold with the rings against the chest. A lot of times when people are holding that isometric position there, they start to feel what it feels like to actively, I like to say pull the rings behind you, or the cue a lot of times coaches use is rip your shirt open. So if, you're holding those rings there, you rip your shirt open is technically the transition. It's a podcast, so maybe people aren't visually seeing what I'm trying to describe. A lot of the times people have enough strength to rep out their first rep just from there. But if not, the place I like to take it next is the same place I like to start with those ring dips and those chin ups. It would be eccentric muscle ups. And an eccentric muscle up would be starting at the top of a ring dip. So I'm lowering myself all the way down to the bottom of the ring dip. And then I'm transitioning myself from the bottom of the ring dip to the top of the false grip pull up. And then I'm lowering myself down to the bottom of the false grip pull up. And really the key component or the key element there is from the bottom of the ring dip to the top of the false grip pull up. You want to keep those rings in contact with your chest the entire time as you're doing that transition. If you just kind of fall out of it, it's really not going to transfer or translate. So a lot of times I'll have people start with what's referred to as spotted eccentric muscle ups, where they lower themselves down and then their feet are on a bench or something, or a box in the bottom of a ring dip, and they lightly spot themselves. So it's just, it's decreasing their body weight just enough so they can control the movement. So they can work on whether it's the movement pattern, whether it's developing the range specific strength for that transition, but it regresses the movement enough that they can execute quality reps over, X number of sets, X number of training sessions to cause an adaptation to eventually be able to do the full eccentric muscle up controlled all the way down to the hanging false grip pull up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. So what time do you usually, 10 seconds, 5 seconds? Do you have a time, just as slow as possible? What's the suggested tempo?
10 to 15 seconds a rep is normally good because it's such a wide range of motion you're moving through.
That's slow. That's awesome. Yeah,
yeah. Because if you think about it too, like when I talked about earlier, I would give someone a 10-second eccentric dip or a 10-second eccentric pull up, and now those movements are combined. So if you give someone a 5-second eccentric muscle up, it's almost not possible to do. It may actually be harder to do that movement fast and under control because
that's true. Yeah. You're just falling out of it at some point.
Yeah, it turns into like a plyometric or something because it's such a large range of motion. So 10 to 15 is good because you're going to be controlling a steady pace throughout that range of motion, and there's not going to be any of those waves of speeding up or slowing down is the goal. And ultimately, though, where the money happens is the transition from the bottom of that ring dip to the top of that false grip pull up. That's really where you want the most attention to detail and the focus to be there.
So if somebody's working that in, are you still having them do chins, dips, false grip work? Or it sounds like they're getting quite a bit of false grip work from that, but are you still having them do pulling work, the dip work?
So it really depends on how they're progressing with that, to be totally honest. I would probably give them to that. I would give someone that just by itself to start because it's pretty demanding at first. It's pretty tough on the shoulders. It's pretty tough on the wrists, especially if people just have, weak ass wrists or sensitive skin. The false grip, if you set up a false grip correctly, and you and I both went to, we've been to a seminar where they cover one of the EDO seminars you and I went to, where they cover setting up a false grip. They do it in such a way that it's stressing the actual wrist bone. Most people set up a false grip more on the palm of their hand, but the way they taught us is more on the actual forearm or your ulna bone, or the ulna, what would it be? The distal end of the ulna there. And it's not comfortable. Typically when I ask someone if they know how to set up a false grip correctly, they'll tell me, yeah, I think I know how to do it. And it's like, if you're setting up a false grip or not, because it's not uncomfortable. It sucks.
Yeah, you've got to build your body's ability to handle that pressure there. It's got to be able to, you got to build up I don't know if it's technically callousing per se, but just your body's resistance to that pressure. And that takes doing the false grip hangs, false grip pull-ups, false grip chest to bar holds, all that stuff.
You could throw in false grip ring rows too if you need to take it through a range of motion. But you're flexing that wrist and then trying to support your body weight on it in a hanging position at some level. So it's not easy, and it's stressful on the wrist. So the wrist routine that we talk about is just as applicable as this to keeping your wrist healthy. So depending on how, a phase, let's say, is 4 weeks, those eccentric muscle ups progress, maybe we would realize then that, hey, we need to spend more time in that false grip isometric position at the top, or maybe we need to work on a little more shoulder extension control. Maybe we need to throw in a little more accessory work, and we can get to that next. So accessory work after the main work would be stuff like Cuban rotations, the first thing I think of there, because
definitely.
It strengthens the shoulder in like a very comparable pattern, we could say. it's nothing else. We've already talked about all the benefits it has for shoulder health. So that's
It'll
probably,
yeah, it'll help a lot with that transition and also locking out the dip at the top. So if you want to get more out of your muscle up and at the top, lock it out, try to have the hands drift away a little bit. If you're doing Cuban rotations, you'll be set up better to handle that load too.
yeah, most people's programs that I start off with for muscle ups in their phase one, the accessory work at the end is going to have Cuban rotations. The other component, so I haven't touched upon this yet. So that muscle up transition is shoulder extension, but it's also shoulder internal rotation. And shoulder internal rotation, I'd probably throw in at the end, and I'd probably superset it with like the Cuban rotations. So what do you like for, and I think we've talked about this on other podcasts, but what do you like for shoulder internal rotation?
I think the easiest thing to execute and also very scalable is just a passive range hold from the sleeper stretch position. So if people don't know what that looks like, you're kind of sideline pseudo fetal position, and you have your bottom arm, elbow straight out from the shoulder, elbow bent at 90 degrees, and you're lightly with your opposite hand taking that top hand into as much shoulder internal rotation as you can. So that's passive there. Slowly letting go of that supporting hand, and then just try to maintain that position for 5 seconds. Let the arm relax for maybe 5 seconds. Repeat. I would work. Sorry, there's a motorcycle coming by. I would work 5 reps of 5 seconds each hold within a set. I think that's a great stimulus and very scalable for anybody.
Perfect. I love it. I had another thought there. What was I going to say? I think the motorcycle maybe distracted me because I totally lost my train of thought there. Oh, I knew where I was going to go with that. So honestly, that's pretty comprehensive. And most people, once you can control, in a session, let's say 10 eccentric muscle ups, you more than likely can bang out a strict muscle up at this point in time, even if it's just one, to impress your friends and post on Instagram. And so this is another issue. Also, though, some people just need to, we could call it grease the groove a little, or like experience that movement pattern. So there's nothing wrong with looping a thin band. So I would say thin is in like, so John, I know this is coming to mind. John has since graduated to the thinnest band for his Nordic crawls. So
usually orange, it seems like.
Yeah, I think that's pretty universal across most brands too. Like it literally almost looks like a piece of floss. It's so thin.
Yeah.
But and it's just enough to give you it reduces your body weight a little. It gives you just enough assistance so you can start to feel what that movement pattern feels like, kind of like what I already said, grease the groove. And if you're just someone that's really uncoordinated, you could run a 4-week phase of that, where you're not knocking out, 10, 15 singles in the beginning of a session just to feel that movement pattern. And I guarantee if you're doing that many at an orange band, within 2 to 4 weeks max, you're going to have strict muscle ups.
Yeah, I think I got my first muscle up. I was doing some sort of eccentric work.
Yeah.
And then within the same program, there was false grip pull-ups. I think false grip pull-ups might have been part of the warm-up maybe. And I was doing a false grip pull-up, and I got to the top, and I was like, oh. And it just was over. Like, just got it. So
yeah. And see, that's what I mean. That's most people's experiences too. You train all the individual components, and then it comes together nicely. It's one of those movements where it actually works out pretty well. So it's nice when it comes together, as opposed to the people that you see force it on when you watch someone's social media and they're chicken winging it, or they're kicking with their hips like they're kind of trying to climb over a wall that they're about ready to fall backwards on. When you train all the components nicely, it works nicely.
So what do you do? Someone that has a muscle up, how do you program that as like you're using it now as a strength tool? Let's say they can get it fairly easily, like they can bang out sets of 5 if they wanted to. How would you utilize that in a strength program?
That's a good question. So generally I'm not going to, I'm trying to think off the top of my head when I programmed recently, because like I talked about in the beginning, it's more of this skill that just kind of comes together nicely. So I rarely train it at a higher rep frequency or as a way like a training tool like one would use for like pull-ups or dips. But the thing I do find myself using it for or revisiting it with is actually my clients that are working towards one-arm chin-ups. And I use it for one-arm chin-ups for a couple reasons. First of all, after we've done a few mesocycles of one-arm chin-up work, I just want to give them a little break or have a little different stimulus going on there, because if we're just doing the same things over and over and over again, we're going to run into overuse injuries. In training the one-arm chin-up, a lot of the movements are going to be pretty monotonous or pretty, repetitive for the most part because it's a very specific skill. So I like to change it up there. So I use the muscle ups because most people that get pretty deep into one-arm chin-up training have a pretty good base level of pulling strength so they can rep out muscle ups. So I do it for that reason, for a little different variety and stimulus. It also is going to increase training morale because you've been there too, training the one-arm chin-up. There's minimal progress, over a given cycle. It's not like most people don't make this massive progress with it right out the gate. So training that muscle up is definitely going to it's going to be like, oh, this is fun. It's a little different than just the monotonous day in, day out of doing the one-arm chin-up specific exercises. But then lastly, because the main problem we run into with training the one-arm chin-up is medial elbow pain. So golfer's elbow, tennis elbow. I don't know which one is on the medial side, and I should know that. So medial epicondylitis.
The inside, since it's smooth, you're smooth right there. Think smooth like a golf ball.
Okay.
And on the outside, you're hairy like a tennis ball. That's how you remember
it. That's great. I have always just defaulted to medial epicondylitis because I don't really care because
golfer's elbow.
Well, you also work with a lot of golfers and tennis players, so it makes sense. But yeah, we run into tendinitis on that inside of the elbow joint training that one-arm chin-up, and the forearm strength needed for a false grip is it's going to strengthen those medial forearm muscles. It's going to strengthen that inside elbow joint is where I'm going with that. So it's also just a good way to strengthen that elbow joint while kind of going down the rabbit hole of one-arm chin-up. So that's really where I would utilize the muscle up outside of someone's request of, wanting to work towards a specific goal. Like, I want a strict muscle up. Okay, great. We're going to do these things. You got it. I want 3 strict muscle ups. I'm like, oh, well, that's annoying, but sure, I can get you 3 strict muscle ups, and once you have one, it just kind of follows that basic linear progression I talked about earlier with the chin-ups and the dips. And then outside of that, why am I going to use a strict muscle up? Maybe for a little variety in a one-arm chin-up training session. Outside of that, it's more of a party trick, I think, in my opinion, than a training tool. But other people have different opinions, and I'm sure they're right too, and that's okay.
Yeah, well, I think in gymnastics, it's used as it's actually a pretty basic skill in gymnastics. I don't even think it's a skill. It's just the transition piece to get you to the top of the rings and do crazier stuff. So if you fall in love with the rings and you want to do more ring flow type things, like the muscle up will be your starting move for everything. So if you're trying to work towards like an iron cross or something, well, you got to get to the top of the rings first. So the muscle up is that piece to get you up there.
So you need to get there somehow. So the muscle up's going to do it.
Yeah.
So do we want to call it at that point?
Yeah, that was great.
Well, it's almost 6 p.m. So that means John's going to
go
get
to
fed
bed
in like 30 minutes.
Yeah, eat real quick, and then I will be passing out for sure.
All right. You want to do the closing thoughts here because you're really good at it.
Yeah, so if you guys are liking the podcast, please download it, give us a rating and review, subscribe, all that good stuff. Share it on your social medias. Tag us in it. We'll happily repost on our IG stories. And if you have a topic you'd like us to go over for a future episode, please don't hesitate to DM myself or Wes. We're all for good ideas. So anything you want insight in training wise, we might do a deep dive on it, or it might just be part of a mailbag for a future episode. Or if there's a practitioner out there you think would be a cool guest, feel free to send us that in a message as well. So yeah, I think that's about it. Thanks again for listening, guys, and we will see you all next week.
Yeah, thanks.